Hello everyone, Kurt Holford here, and welcome back to another episode from Holford Labs. Today we're going to continue on our observations about the other considerations I was talking about before in regards to wearing your suspension system, if you will, your belt and everything else, but also in the deploying of arms. The big thing I really want people to focus on when we talk about this right here is that please understand that I do not believe for a single second that the sword in two hands positions are only limited to unarmored considerations. In fact, I would actually say that many of them, in some ways, are actually exalting the purpose and uses of these things, these devices on the hips, because they allow for parts not to get into the way. You don't want to lose a dagger in the middle of a fray. You don't want it to fall off. You don't want it to hurt you. And those are things right there that absolutely can become incredibly dangerous situations for the combat professional if they're not aware of what happens to them. So we're going to take a look at that here today, and we're going to look at the sword in two hands situations, and also how they work with the suspension of the belt and worn arms. But before we get into it, everybody, please, as always, don't forget, like, subscribe, share with a friend out there, and if you're new to the channel, please join us for this journey of the 14th century arms of looking at Fiore's armazzari. We'd love to have you along for this. We'd love to hear your thoughts and your considerations. And so please, leave a comment below to let me know what your thoughts are. Don't forget, ring that bell to be notified when new content is delivered. Because again, I try to put out as much as possible right here as it comes along. And I'd love to have you along on this journey right here and to grow this channel, which is not possible without viewers like you. So with that being the case here, let's take a look at these other considerations of the sword in two hands while wearing belted equipment. So this week here, we're going to be dialing it back. And like I said, last week, we spent a lot of time looking at Mezzo di Ferro and, within the armored section, why the sword two hands on the handle and the way that in the center, what options right there, what are we seeing with this? Well, this week right here, we're going to start taking a look at the sword and two-hand positions. Now, it is my opinion, and again, this is just mine, every posta and position within Fiore's armazzari is connected to some level of professional kitted practice. And what I mean by that is the person that's doing this, whether they're in posta di donna or whatever the case might be, they are going to use these positions as they see fit to be able to contend with armored opponents, unarmored opponents, and they themselves be armored to some varying degree. Even a gambeson, if you've seen my, my sword caliber videos, gambesons are very robust, and I would consider them to be some form of armor because while they don't stop things like plate or stop slicing and cutting like chainmail, they do have a function within armor, which is anti-impact. So again, when I say this is because ultimately every position when it comes down into Fiore's sword and two-hand section, I believe is possible to be done in armor, in some form of armor, and also in an unarmored context. And it is simplified down because, as a person of this time, you may be facing in very different directions. But to go into this right here, we're going to talk about, once again, the scabbard of the sword and the dagger and what happens as I make these sword and two-hand positions. And also some considerations that may not be visible here because I'm not wearing a helmet, I'm not wearing a lot of chainmail. This is an instructional portion right there, and I leave it to you all, dear viewers, to again experiment as you will with these positions. So starting off with the sword here, we look at Porta di Ferro. Now, interestingly enough about Porta di Ferro, this is where we talked about Latin the week before about Mezzo Porta di Ferro with the sword here. My arm is in between the scabbard right here. My arm is in between the scabbard of the sword. When I have, being here and with one turn, again, just how I have my dagger situated, my arms are not inhibiting any action that can happen. And my arms are close to my body, and I have the ability to do many different opportunities. So that's just a basic look right here. So again, from the side, you can see the scabbard is close to the body, so I can find it. And upon, maybe I'm in a position where I'm standing like this, and I draw, once again, it's tight to the body. Posta di donna alla soprano. So whether it be this position here, which I have done in armor before. It's not comfortable, but it is possible. Again, being up here or being here, it doesn't matter because essentially both these pieces are out of my way when it comes down to all methods of crossing. And again, the thing that's happening most here is that it's flopping left and right here, which to me signifies that I would have to do more tailoring of this scabbard to make sure that it's a little bit tighter, but also still has this vertical node to my body. Mind you, again, these are Curtisms. Moving along into fenestra. You can tell right off the bat just by shifting. So this pushed the dagger behind me. But that doesn't mean that I could say forward on this right here, which gives axis of use. On the left fenestra, which is not depicted but it is spoken about, again, everything is out of my way. The workspace is clear. So these are all considerations. Again, why these positions, I think, optimize to that. Pospidana a la sinistra. Again, everything is out of the way right here. I have the scabbard behind me. Right now, interestingly enough, cudgel play, I might throw this and then go with my sword, as far as the theory of operation for cudgel play. But again, from here, again, everything is no longer limited when it comes down to movement and flow. Okay. So now we're starting to go into more of the movement position that might be elongated and going into the instabile and stabile positions. Notice here is posta longa. Now, nothing is in my way. This is an important thing here because the posta longa, as I see it, is the extension of your shot. Then if you want to make sure that everything that comes off of this is clear so that your equipment doesn't go all over the place. This is an important factor. Okay? Going across into, and I'm just going to go through categorical ones right here as far as this goes, right? Going into mesoportifera, right? So I can be here with it as far as this goes, and we've already talked about this from armor. Everything is very available right here, and there's nothing really limiting anything that I have. We know posta breve, as we talked about last week, very tight to the body. I can keep this close to me as much as possible. I can turn the sword however I need to here. The workspace is not inhibited in any way, shape, or form. Now we go to dente di cingaro. And this right here is where we start to see some things that are very important. Is because once again, we start to look at where the scabbard falls to the body. So, mesoportifera, as I pull back, notice here, the scabbard is behind me. So nothing here is stopping my arm in this space. The scabbard is out of the way. I can do the thrust place and come down, and it stays behind me. Now this is an important piece because as we start talking about this, one of the things I think is important to note is there a left side coda longa? I will tell you right here and now, I do not believe that there's a left side coda longa except for this right here. This to me is what I think left side coda longa is for Fiore, and the reason, for Fiore Armazzari, and the reason being is because from here I'm using my arm harness to be able to protect myself, but additionally I'm also not boggled up. This is very uncomfortable for me, okay? It's very uncomfortable for me to be on this left side right here, and anatomically here, if I come across here and it's back, I'm hitting my scabbard, just my shoulder top right here, so whether it's here or here, the sword being forward on my left side, I don't necessarily think that Fiore did that accidentally. I think that all of his dente di cingaros, they're meant to be on the left side, and his coda longa, for the spada e due mani, is supposed to be on the right side, whereas on the left side, or I'm sorry, your non-dominant side, is going to be a one-handed variant. This makes sure also that my tie points aren't bundled up here, my arms, my gauntlets are not, all over the place. Again, there's a lot that you can do off of this right here, but again, talking about pulsativa positioning, coming down and then coming up, which allows for different types of rotations. That's an important piece here for me because, again, from here coming across, I'm constantly in a place of defense and offense with very, very, very limited distraction from my scabbard. If I came back here with this, it's still behind me, but one thing that you don't notice on this here is that I get the scabbard. This goes into my arm, and that causes different kind of things that I might feel sensationally. In my right arm here, again, I'm not wearing chainmail, it feels like my tie points are going over my body. If I let go of the arm and let it sink down, immediately all that goes away and response comes right back to what I have to do. Again, experiment, that is a Kurtism. Fiore is silent on the matter here, but that is why I think that there's no left side coda longa or right side denti di Chingara, because by crossing arm play, one, they're on top of each other. The difference with the Fenestra is my arms are out in front of me, and it's easier to come down to a spot of stability so I can take action elsewhere. Moving right along, so frontale. We know, again, in the Getty, he shows it on this side, and the Pisani does it, he shows it on this side. Either way, this is a position that is not limited. And again, it is an unstable position, which tells me that essentially either side, just like with the Fenestra, you have the ability to do that. Nothing is limiting me here whatsoever. It's just a turn of the sword, and I can shift in a variety of different ways, which is possible depending upon what you're trying to do. Okay? We've talked about coda longa already, and again from here, whether the dagger comes to the side like it just did, it's in between my hands, but it's not going to stop me from striking through. Nothing here is limiting up. So the workspace is clear. If the dagger is vertical, again, nothing is stopping it here. I can always make this a little bit tighter here, but regardless, again, I'm not inhibited. So more things to consider. Next one is going to be going into bicorno. Bicorno is, again, this is another one of those positions where I do believe that he is going to keep it to a single side of play. Unless his whole point is to be able to cross over like this, which I don't think is necessarily the case. Coming up like this right here, or keeping it in the center of the body so that I can turn off and do basic things like this, is where I believe this position is. But again, nothing is limiting within my workspace down here and taking away from what I have. Finally, denti di Chingara, Mezzano. So once again, we look at Mezzoportifero. I turn into denti di Chingara. My arm is not limiting this. As I turn back, again, my arm is not inhibiting this. So I'm free to strike out, two hands crossed, and not have anything stop me. And in the situation here where I came over top like this, I'm still not limited because the workspace is cleared up here to be able to turn and move. Again, this does not mean that they are not going to be a perfect situation. It is just talking about situations that may arise and things you have to contend with while you're utilizing a sword in two hands in an armored state.
So as you can see with the video, to me, once again, we're starting to see that there might be a favored position and play that Fiore has with the equipment that he's got on his body. I want to say also a big part about this right here is, I've oftentimes had the question from people about, like, are there two Fenestras? Are there two coda longas? And here's my answer to that. Because of how my experience in the Marines, right, and how we had to have our body armor set up to be able to deploy arms if need be, there was a mode of operation that we tried to do to optimize that would make fighting effectiveness increased. So for me, when I was always taught, you had your magazines right at your waist. You didn't want them too high because you can't reach in here now. You want it right where you could pull and move quite easily to be able to get your main arm back into fighting form. Additionally, also, I was also taught it's also wise to kind of shift it over to the left a little bit, because that way your free arm is right here. That way you can keep fighting on here if you need to, as well as other considerations that might be worn when you're talking about optimizing your fighting kit. Now, this is an important piece right here, is because if I put it on this side right here, well, people might argue I could put my arm right here and rest it on there, but that makes it harder and pushes the barrel down for the rifle, which is difficult. And muscling is never a good idea when you talk about marksmanship. Now, why am I talking about this right here, especially when it comes on to Fiore's Armazzari? The reason why I'm saying this is because essentially I believe that there is a connection. A conversation I'd had a while back in regards to when we look at present-day combat professionals is it a good idea to look at how we do it or did it or they do it and then to analyze it back? I believe that there's wisdom in that, but I don't believe it's an ideal situation to say that you want to fight exactly like that. To me, I approach this as a behaviorist. What are the things that people in fighting need to be able to do? They need to be able to stand in a way to be able to deliver effective fighting. They need to be able to deploy arms when they don't have arms that are deployed. And they need to be able to switch when one is no longer available to them. This kind of effectiveness right there is something that I believe is a universal concept across the ages. So whether it's a sword or a high-powered rifle, it doesn't necessarily matter. The behavior of the fighting person of any time has been in that capacity in some form or fashion. And whether it be the musket, about why you might wear a pouch in a certain area to be able to do certain things, and I don't certainly know these things, I am willing to bet that they optimize this to ergonomically make it easier to deploy arms or to make it harder to deploy arms in certain situations. That's something else. And work other forms and fashions. So if we look at Fiore's Armazzari, this is one of the reasons why I believe, if you look at the sword in one hand position, why, which also if you look at the images when he talks about, the sword in one hand as being good both in and out of armor. This position right here, is it Codalonga? Potentially. Is it Dente di Chingaro? I don't know. But what do I say here is that it has similar attributes to the concept of the sword in two-hand Codalonga, which is on the right side. And I believe this is the case here is because of how tie points to armor work, how you don't want to necessarily turn over your arm and make it twist over when you're starting to feel tension as far as everything else goes, because it does feel, at least to me, differently when armor is worn. And that if we cross our arms at certain capacities when you are wearing what the combat professional, the armature would have worn, that can make things difficult to deploy arms and make so you lose hold of what you're trying to use. So I use Codalonga as an example here because I think in many ways, Codalonga is an example of why you want to fight specifically in one form or fashion, and why Codalonga is only depicted on the right side and not the left. And that's because, like I was showing in the video, the cross arm piece here, the bell cops, all these things right here, these are big factors that do make it difficult. Not to mention also that scabbard right there. That scabbard can get in the way. And yeah, we can all say, well, I can just push my arms a little bit more here. Now the tie points and everything else is even more tension-based. So it's not about, can I fight out of both ways? It's that in his world, he might say it's ill-advised. This is another reason why I think Dente di Chingaro and Mezzo Portaferro, any of the low left side play positions, are very specific, is because, again, he is accommodating for the possibility of two things. Being able to not interfere with your combat setup. And I think that's an important thing that they would have talked about in this case. Utilizing all of that, I can keep my arm in this space relatively easy and not worry about bumping up against somebody right here, bumping up against my scabbard, or getting something caught up on there, which is even worse in that kind of situation. So I don't have all the answers to that, but as I look at the positions as they are, and I do my best to fight strictly to a concept, I think a part here that is very important to remember is that just like anything in the modern era, can I, as a modern practitioner, wear it so that my magazines are right here? Can I make it work? Yes, I can very easily. But is this a time that you want to make it work? I don't believe so. I don't believe Fiore is playing a game. And I don't believe that I believe that the intention of what he says, as he says in the beginning, every dirty, nasty trick to preserve one's life, has any concept about anything other than making sure you are ergonomically and systematically set up in a way to deploy arms effectively. So that's going to do it for this video here. I am curious about your thoughts out there, dear viewers. Please let me know what your thoughts are. These videos are a little bit longer, but again, as we get into the concept of the plays of the sword and armor, it's going to get to a point here where these sword and these elongated positions, they have a place. And we will get there when we talk about the plays, because an elongated sword against an armor is very effective if you know how to use it. And it has things that can cause against somebody. So as we get to that, please keep a note here is because that we're talking about this because, again, the sword in two hands is not dead just because you're wearing armor. And remember, armor, that's a variable. Are you wearing a hauberk? Do you have more movement of your chest in this space right here? Do you have a full encapsulated cuirass? Is it more of a corazina? Who knows? Remember, the body type and functionality is the part right here that may have been a part of this practice. So, like I said, leave a comment below. Let me know what your thoughts are out there. Join us on this journey. And as always, everyone, please, until I see you, stay safe out there, train well, and fight on. I'll see you all soon.